Hi, everyone. Sorry we're about 10 minutes late. We try our best to be here on time. We're starting with document 61 today. I believe number 60 was the one we got to last time. And so as Suzie gets the playback sorted out, I'm going to just share my screen for a few seconds and see how this works. So give me one moment.
Hey guys, hopefully you can hear me all right.
Good. I think we're good. Yeah, so I think we got up, the last one we looked at was New Speaker Series, SIDToday Chronicles, Adventures and Analysis. And I think we were kind of excited to look at the next one because it was going to be SCS and Executive Protection. Suzie, do you want me to share screen or are you going to do it? I don't care.
Oh, sorry. If you want me to, I can. I'm just going to dig out the file. Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
You were doing it.
Yeah, no, I was, and then you came online. I didn't quite know, so I'm just going to do it.
Okay, sorry.
Not a problem at all.
I was actually tweeting for once in my life, like during the stream.
Not a problem. Okay, so I've got number 61 on screen. And obviously the first thing we notice is this
protection.
Yeah. And it says, you may know that the Special Collection Service is a joint NSA-CIA organization whose mission is to covertly collect SIGINT from official US establishments abroad, such as embassies and consulates. Do you know that SCS helps protect top-level US officials when they travel overseas? Their duties is to assist executive protection, working directly with the US Secret Service. So executive protection operations are the #1 priority for them. And they were formally tasked to provide real-time for the protection for the vice president in '79. They typically support from 10 to 15 executives.
Up just a little bit. I just want to see what this is about the Secret Service. Levied by the US Secret Service.
Yeah.
So they're operating under the Secret Service.
Yeah.
So then presumably the diplomatic protection squads would be a customer of the NSA.
Very good. Yeah, good point. For sure. That's what it sounds like. They also conduct sustained monitoring of host government security services, police communications, and airport frequencies. The equipment is used by SOD teams that is capable of monitoring and recording the RF range of 20 megahertz to 1 gigahertz.
They scan the VHF, UHF spectrum for indications of threat activity.
Yeah. So basically they step up what is already probably, the massive amount of collection they do all over the world in host countries.
And demonstrations. That's very interesting. Mm-hmm. It's interesting in the New Zealand context because the Prime Minister of New Zealand, in a media interview from inside the Parliament buildings, claimed to not be aware of 10,000 protesters that were on the doorstep of that same building protesting him. So the likelihood of him not being aware of that demonstration would be extremely slim.
That would be almost, you would expect it to be almost nil for sure.
The interesting thing for me about like the Secret Service being a customer of the NSA is that this model that the US has created is invariably replicated around the rest of the countries, which is telling me when I'm reading that, I'm reading that the Diplomatic Protection Squad in New Zealand is a customer of the GCSB.
Definitely. And it just talks in the next paragraph, it just talks about them working closely with the Secret Service and special agents, and that any threat-related SIGINT is immediately passed on to the on-site agents.
The team, sorry, scroll up again just a little bit, just like 1 or 2 lines.
Yeah.
The teams activate 24-hour coverage prior to the arrival of the VIP.
Yeah. Host country officials have been aware of threat-related incidents. And okay, this is, it's almost like in the next paragraph, it looks like they're trying to almost justify it, because they talk about how host country officials have been aware of related incidents and for whatever reason have been unwilling to share that information with the Secret Service in a number of occasions.
So NSA just accesses it anyway.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that type of justification where they're obviously doing this explicitly against, I guess, the host country's awareness or whatever. Let me see. And they give an example. Yeah, so they're just giving an example of where where they were successful. And in the last paragraph, they talk about secure wireless phones and STEs, which is secure terminal equipment, allowing all concerned ID agents to work the rooms. And then they mention fusion centers. That's interesting.
And they're openly stating that they moved the spy gear in diplomatic pouches and hosted embassies.
Definitely. Suzie, do you think this article is worth noting, or do you want to just move on to the next one?
There's things that are interesting contextually for me, but I'm not sure that there's anything in there. I mean, it ratifies that the Secret Service is a customer of the NSA. It ratifies that, yes, they are shipping collections equipment via diplomatic pouches and through the embassy. Makes you wonder how big a diplomatic pouch is. When you think about a diplomatic pouch, you usually think about like a document bag with some papers in it. But that would be a much bigger pouch than that to get all that collections equipment overseas. It'd be more
Definitely.
like diplomatic containers.
Now, I know that The Intercept covered a lot of issues with Iraq. Is this one that they have publicized before?
Scroll up. It's always interesting for me to see the provenance of the document. So in this case, the strategy division, CSRC. Which is CSRC, is that like Coalition Support Resource Center or something?
Okay. Yeah, or CSRC is the Collection Strategies and Requirements Center.
Collection Strategies and Requirement Center, right. Mm-hmm. Oh, that reminds me, upstream, when we're talking about swimming upstream.
Yeah.
Upstream is a specific, it relates to 702. There's actually a definition of upstream in context of 702 and some of the other Snowden documents. So we need to look more into that, because it's correct that people are accessing data from NSA, but where data is pulling, where NSA is pulling that data from is actually domestic US records, includes domestic US records.
Interesting.
Furnished under Section 702. So upstream is like a program, and an NSA program, and one of the more controversial ones.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We need to do a bit more reading on that at some point. No, see, this Iraq stuff doesn't, I mean, this doesn't particularly interest me. This is exactly what you'd expect.
Okay,
Like
interesting.
you would expect that in a war zone that they are exploiting the communications infrastructure of the country that they're invading. I
Yeah,
don't think
that
particularly
definitely is kind of
surprising.
par for the course. Okay, yeah, this is just pretty much nothing. Data acquisition update. Okay, so they're congratulating themselves on the capture of a terrorist. Due to the example of seamless interaction with the
We've already read this. How are we back at this?
This is maybe maybe they were talking about something they'd already covered, but this is number 64.
Open it up again, please.
Sure.
Because this is the second document that references Baziani, but perhaps there is something else about methodology in there.
Yeah.
Commercial relationships, endpoint operations, cryptanalytic exploitation using special purpose hardware, and midpoint collection.
Definitely.
Midpoint collection is man in the middle. Is it compromising like the communication while it's occurring?
That makes sense. Have we talked about the Network Analysis Center before?
Yeah.
That sounds familiar. Yeah. And then the global network, again, we've talked about that before.
You see Network Analysis Center, one of three key SIGINT development centers. That's the target analysis, network analysis, and social, whatever it is, social analysis center. Okay, midpoint accesses on a community basis to manage midpoint accesses. Okay, I'd like to know more about midpoint accesses because I'm not convinced it's just simply man in the middle or monitoring mid communication.
So I'm going to stop screen sharing now, and maybe because Suzie will know which documents we've already looked at, or which the internet has already, the Intercept has already looked up. So if we can switch over, I think that would probably be
Oh,
good.
I'd like to do some more reading on that one. Was that 60?
Oh yeah, no. 1 second.
That was 64, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's just data acquisition update. I'm just checking chat real quick to see if anybody's talked about the midpoint collection.
Okay, and I'm just sharing screen.
Awesome.
Is it just me, or like, can you see, like, is the document a lot bigger when I share on my screen?
Yeah, I think
The text size a lot bigger?
there are different options to when you share, and I'm not sure if I'm clicking the best one. It's just I was clicking the one that just let me share the browser principally. Like they give you like 5 different varieties of sharing.
Okay, because I was struggling to read the text off your screen. There was a lot of text like showing in one display, but on mine it's like toddler size.
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I was wondering because yeah, usually we scroll pretty fast, and I guess if it's showing so few words at once, it's easier to keep up with that.
I find these documents mostly difficult to skim. If there's anything in there, like the technical language and stuff, you really have to sit and ponder it.
Definitely.
So I just wanted to check the last few paragraphs of this. Right, ever since 9/11, Data Acquisition has hosted a forum, the Terrorist Pursuit Team, for
Yeah.
exploration of new counterterrorism requirements.
Yeah, and they're talking about it being successful and wanting to expand on it.
I always fantasize about what's underneath the redactions. Like, we have also obtained the services of William Binney from SID Systems Engineering.
Yeah, I'm sure one of the redactions is a name like that. You know, it's got to be there somewhere.
Okay.
And they mentioned again, they mentioned the NSA's transformational programs, and we know what that is. So
Oh, crap, drat. Hold on. Okay, 65, right?
yeah.
Sigint travels with Charlie. Charlie meals again. He's going to the UK. He won't just be sipping tea, he'll be going to a celebration. He'll be sipping champagne. And that's it. Okay.
Easy, fast one to breeze through.
Take me to your leaders. Oh God, this is yet another how wonderful it was to meet the managers.
Yeah, and then it links back to the other similar documents that we have looked at before. I remember a few of them. Shadowing so-and-so.
Okay. Oh, they want to know about your life before the NSA.
You would think they would have done that already in the vetting process.
Yeah, I would be inclined to tell them as little as possible personally, but
yeah, and I don't know about the NSA, but I did talk to one FBI whistleblower who was talking about how bad the vetting process is pretty much across the board for the FBI, for other groups.
backlog, isn't there like some huge like 6 or 12 month backlog or something for clearances?
Yeah, and he was telling me that basically the FBI sets the bar for that, and so when they do a bad job, it gives everyone else a bad license to do a bad job, and that basically he was talking about it being outsourced and done for money, and there's all sorts of issues with it, but basically it's just a problem across the board.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never heard of the virtual reporting board before. I'm not sure if it's significant, but I'm writing it down.
Best practices in reporting, is this like internal reporting or external
Yeah,
reporting?
it almost sounds like internal ratting on each other. I'm not sure if that's correct.
It's an organization in customer response, but speaking for analysts. That's strange.
Yeah, I'm not, it's kind of obscure to me as to what the actual purpose is, even though they're trying to explain it here a little bit.
Futures reporting, career panel and advisory council, reporting policy and guidance.
So basically, it sounds like this is an internal group that's kind of self-policing or, yeah, kind of regulating themselves. Is that right to you?
I'm not sure. I can't get a grip yet on what they're reporting on and who to.
Yeah.
They're saying who they work with, like they're name dropping like all these different organizations, and they're saying where they fit into the company structure, so to speak, but we don't yet know what they do. Okay, this makes it sound like they're doing like user interviews for user testing,
Yeah.
developing like use cases and stuff, but that doesn't seem right, really.
Yeah. Oh, random side note. I'm just reading chat, and someone let us know that when I was sharing screen, they
Reporting
can.
tools. Okay, so reporting tools and software. So in software, you run your query and you generate a report based on that query. So the reporting is the output of the queries from the database. So in this case, the queries are what's generating their analysis, their product, their intelligence product. The reporting is literally the report that the analyst would then submit to the manager or whoever. Okay, so that's starting to make a bit more sense.
Yeah, and just as a side note, you were talking about the difference between the way my screen was displaying and yours is displaying now, and just someone let us know that when I was sharing that they could see my tabs in a way that they can't see with your.
Yeah, that's true. I did notice that as well. You can see your full browser window.
Yeah, which it's fine.
Watch for more information in tomorrow's SIDToday, what the reporting board can do for you. The money talk. What's the money talk? God, I want to go. Where are you guys going? Okay. So the reporters are the analysts who are submitting their reports to whoever their seniors are. And the reporting board and report requirements board is taking feedback from those reporters. It feels weird for me to use the word reporters in the sense, but this is how they're using it. To work out what is inhibiting their reporting process and what's slowing them down and or isn't working at all and or would make things better.
Yeah.
And then they essentially have like a news group called the Virtual Reporting Board.
So we're on to 60.
Oh, look, it's the essay it's the winners of the essay contest for this.
Oh man.
First place, $300. Wow, a global scenario for 2020 by somebody.
Well, that's some very cheap analytic work that the
Yeah, I
NSA.
reckon $600 for 3.
Well, for the winners, how many other essays did they use but didn't pay for?
Well, imagine what they paid their like corporate analysts.
Yeah.
They'd be paying like $300 an hour. The Empire of Unintended Consequences. I would love to read that.
Yeah, I like that title a lot. It sounds like a very interesting essay.
And who was the president-elect? That would be 2004, would be Bush.
Yeah.
It's funny to call him president-elect when he already was president.
Maybe, for the president-elect, maybe it's
2020, the 2020
yeah,
president-elect.
it's throwing it to the hypothetical future president. So.
Read this. I would love to. I kind of wish it was a hyperlink I could click on. That would be so handy. I agree. Especially when they link to like the business vision documents and stuff. Okay. Oh, look, IAI's been doing this for over 30 years. That's something we didn't know.
Yeah, so this is interesting. I like this document in that it's adding to what we looked at previously, obviously. So if I, in writing my next article about these documents, I'd say, and we learned about more about this particular subject that we covered before.
Its aim is to promote an interest in international events and affairs. So that's an outward aim, while providing unique insights into those issues. That's an internal aim.
Yeah.
So they're encouraging people to be interested in the issues externally, outwardly on the global stage, but then they're taking those insights internally, ingesting those insights, and then passing them on to the NSA.
Definitely.
They pursue, and the fact that they say that IAI pursues its mission, that's very super military industrial complex like language for what's actually a nonprofit.
Yeah. Special advisor to Clinton, policy coordinator North Korea.
Remember, guys, this is the organization that the NSA said was a recruitment tool.
Yeah, and you have the RAND Corporation as well, of course. It's a very deep state military industrial complex group of people, which is not particularly surprising, but it's still interesting to me. This recruitment tool has been very successful. Interesting.
Again
yeah.
Those words. Okay. I think we pretty much covered it already. The only new thing there would be that they're really cheap in what they pay.
Free analysis.
Radical Islam in Central Asia, that sounds like Indonesia or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's been more of an issue.
Oh, it's not. It's actually Uzbekistan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say that the whole issue in the Indonesian area has been more of an issue in the last year than I had remembered it being in 2004. So that makes sense that it's not located there. MG Quirk. I hate it when they use these terms like walkabout, like, I'm wondering if this is referring to Pine
These
Gap.
documents like virtually never say anything.
Yeah.
Commercial Technologies Group. It's probably the most interesting factor.
Yeah.
They're in the data acquisition area.
The sensitivities encountered with foreign partner enabling.
So I assume that would be sensitivities like the entire domestic New Zealand population being unaware that there are NSA facilities on New Zealand soil, that there's NSA staff at those facilities, and that the NSA is in fact paying money to the New Zealand spy agencies to ship data offshore, to facilitate the shipping of the data offshore.
Yeah, that would definitely fall under that category, you'd think. Yeah, and they're talking about the commercial technologies mission and the link to SIGINT mission. So that goes back to that whole commercial groups interlinking and intermeshing with the NSA again. Not that, and again, that's not really new, but it's just what the only thing of note other than what we've already talked about that I'm seeing here.
CTG's efforts to document target technology trends and create target profiles. Sounds like these, like we talked previously about how this is like the dawn of the PRISM stuff, right? When they're saying our targets are increasingly using commercial solutions and blah, 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 blah. Seems like these guys are responsible for finding out what the targets are using, and therefore what NSA needs to learn how to breach or exploit or partner with the company involved to backdoor.
Definitely.
To document the target technology trends and to create target profiles. Okay. Again, it's really contextual. That giant blimp, we've the intercept.
Sorry about that.
Oh, and the high frequency exploitation, we've already done this one as well. It's just a repost. I think this is about to get much more interesting.
Huh. Is it actually deleted?
Of
or
every document to be missing, it's seriously that one?
Did the Intercept remove it, or what happened, do you think?
Surely not. So let's go and have a look. That's a really interesting one to be missing, though.
Definitely.
Okay, the doc's still here, but the link was bad.
Awesome. I mean, I'm glad that it's there at all.
Negroponte. You know what he was responsible for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Negroponte was involved in all of the training of the guerrilla forces in Latin America for the various nasty takeovers, the death squads. And it was after he showed up in Iraq that the death squads began flourishing.
That's awful.
Yeah.
No, and it just goes to show you again that we're not going into these countries bringing peace and democracy. We're bringing death squads and bombs. So
it also shows you how someone with a serious military history ends up in an ambassador role and the US representative to the United Nations.
Yeah. There's a lot of overlap.
Let me reread that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, until then, he was the US rep to the United Nations until he was appointed ambassador. You wouldn't think that the ambassador would be a military. You would think the ambassador would be diplomat, and that crossover between military and diplomat is actually noteworthy.
Yeah. To me, I mean, I don't know if I'm correct here, but I associate the position of ambassador with the CIA and intelligence community, but not so much the straight up the military like this. So, and I think people sometimes I think people think of the UN as an aid group in these situations, but they don't take into account the military role that it has enough, or the peacekeeping role and all of that.
Protect what's true. The redaction theory of The Intercept is that if a name is already available in the public sphere as being associated with NSA, then they don't redact the name. But if the name is not available in the public sphere, then they do redact the name.
Yeah. Now, I want to read this document really closely.
The Director of Central Intelligence Representative at the US UN then announced she was also moving to Baghdad to continue to be his intelligence briefer.
Interesting.
So he has his own personal CIA liaison.
Yeah.
Briefing him. And the NSA representative to the US UN. Okay.
Ambassador Danforth, the new US representative of the UN, and other officers need time to work, blah, blah. That next paragraph looks interesting. Negroponte years. Historic SIGINT support with the US State Department for the UN Security Council.
Up to the minute intelligence on the UN Security Council. It's like they just stack every deck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They just, every single deck is stacked.
So SIGINT helped US UN and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan, countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations. I wonder what they mean by helped their decision. Do they just mean in keeping people up to date, or
Secretly historic? Look at this.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't highlight it. They were gathering information on the strategic intent of nations, using it for tactical diplomatic maneuvering. So this is like the next, oh no, hang on, if he was the predecessor, because we already read about Colin Powell, right? Colin Powell receiving intelligence prior to convincing the United Nations to take on the Iraq debacle.
Yeah.
Now we have them referencing giving Negroponte the same types of information.
Yeah.
As the US mounted a strategic response to these attacks and worked with the UN to garner world support for the global war on terrorism. The
Yeah,
UN
so that sounds
was working on that.
And to garner world support, I mean, to me, I read propaganda and manipulation in that. for the global war on terrorism. That goes to exactly what you had discussed before about the UN possibly being an active part of the cycle of war.
This is the first I've ever heard of the UN working to get support for a war.
Exactly, but I think that's what. No, wait.
It's
We were talking
against their
before.
charter. On the surface, that's a violation. Because I was just thinking in the previous paragraph where they say working to approve resolutions condemning the attacks, like, why would they need to make resolutions condemning the attacks? That was instantly what I was thinking. They wouldn't need to. Like, they can, put out a press release saying this sucks, but they don't need to get a resolution.
Yeah.
I guess the reason they wanted the resolution is because they then wanted the UN to act.
Yes, that makes sense.
But I've never heard of the UN promoting war of any description, and for whatever reason. The charter of the UN states that they were established for the precise opposite reason.
Yeah, and I think what I was remembering before is that we talked about the possibility that their rejection of the initial push for the war in Iraq and all of that may have been some sort of like,
Wow, this deserves a screenshot and a tweet.
yeah, feigning sort of move, and then they're doing this. So yeah, just actively working to garner support. It's not just like the war in Iraq. It's not just war in Afghanistan or one specific place. It's the global war on terrorism, I believe it says. Yeah, literally the global war on terrorism.
And see where it said earlier in the document about secretly historic?
Yeah.
I believe it's referring to like the earlier documents about Colin Powell and
Yeah.
the NSA intelligence products helping him to secure the vote. That's so messed up that these guys walk into the chambers already knowing what's going to happen, and then they act it out like a theater.
Yeah. I think this really adds to the conversation we had that other stream about this topic. I think it really confirms the worst interpretation of it in some ways.
That's disappointing. Okay, let's keep reading. SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. SIGINT, those Security Council resolutions are significantly after Afghanistan, but Afghanistan isn't mentioned until much later in that paragraph.
Yeah.
SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the US President's speech at the UN General Assembly in September of 2002. Was that the WMDs? Was that Bush's WMDs? Let's have a look and see what we can find about Bush's. Actually, we might be able to find it on YouTube. It's probably the place to go. I'm in the wrong browser. September 12th, that'll be it, the September 2002. What's Fox News got to say about it?
Mr. Secretary General.
The President spoke. Oh, okay, but it doesn't actually tell you what.
Distinguished delegates and ladies and gentlemen. We meet 1 year And one day after a terrorist attack,
This must have been the case for war in
grief
Iraq.
to my country
Yeah.
and brought grief by the will and wickedness of any man, and to bring medical care where it is desperately needed. As a symbol of our commitment to human dignity,
We're going to
The
bring
United
medical
States,
care. I'm sorry, all I can do is laugh
side
at this.
by side
We're going to bring medical
with
care
Israel
to Iraq
in
by
peace and
destroying
security,
it.
like all other
No, the
people
double speak is complete here.
that serves their interests.
And peace in
Many
Palestine, he just
hides
said.
within many nations, including my own. And the regime's forces were poised to continue their march to seize other countries and their resources.
Now he's saying Iraq is a threat
Had
to the
Saddam Hussein
region.
been appeased instead of stopped, he would have endangered the peace and stability of the world.
No, he's talking
If
about
this aggression
Gulf
was
War
stopped
One.
by the might of coalition forces and the will of the United Nations.
Ha! See how he ties them together?
Yeah.
The
I
might,
see that.
the might of the coalition forces and the will, or the will of the coalition forces. No, might of the coalition forces and the will of the
Yeah.
United Nations. So yeah, this is where he's roping them together.
Mhm.
This is where he is tying them together. And then if we go back to the document where they are specifically talking about his speech, US President's speech at the UN, Sigan also contributed to the composition of Bush's speech in September 2002 and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council on the case against the Iraq dictator, among other events. So that is the NSA directly saying that they are responsible for WMDs.
Well, for the
WMD
narrative.
dossier.
Yeah, for that line of argument for the war, which I had thought
And
at the
and they're
time.
calling that historic. They're saying it's historic. Well, it was fucking historic. It was a historic clusterfuck mess up.
Yeah,
Epic
and
proportions.
in the wake of that, after everyone had realized, in the public, it's kind of sort of, after it started to be admitted as a massive mistake, and that the media had been complicit in spreading this narrative, I had heard more about the CIA kind of groupthink being what instigated this argument. So it's surprising to me to see the NSA also being behind it. I mean, it's not hugely surprising, but it's not something I had heard before. So, I mean, Suzie, is it that way for you? Had you heard more about the CIA's involvement in this, or?
I'm going to finish the document and then I want to have a quick look through and see if there's anything else that Bush said in that video.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't want to make judgment calls and on questions like that until I've read through everything that there is, and I'm very interested to see what other documents there are related to the UN. I think this topic is actually one of the most significant topics in the Snowden files.
I agree.
It's something that we don't hear very much about.
Absolutely.
There's been like passing mentions of like NSA and UN, but the focus has been on NSA, where for me, the focus here is not on NSA, the focus is on the UN.
Yeah.
What is the UN doing? What is the involvement of the UN? Because we're always told like the UN is crippled by the big powers having veto ability at the Security Council. Like the UN is the victim. Like the UN, it would be really great if only blah, 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 blah.
Basically, if only they had more authority and power.
Exactly. But what this is showing is that the authority and power that it already has is being used to support war rather than to avoid it, as far as I can tell. I mean, this is my read of now multiple documents suggesting exactly that. It seems like these guys are in cahoots. Are they in cahoots because the US has, or I mean, you just asked about role of CIA. I would imagine one of the roles of CIA would be compromising the integrity of the UN, getting agents into positions of power at the UN, specifically so that they could work together. And then your next question would be the revelations about Hillary Clinton ordering biometric data collection on Kofi, wasn't it Kofi Annan?
I think so. I'm not on.
I think it was during Kofi Annan's
that sounds right.
reign at the UN as Inspector General. perhaps I'm wrong, perhaps it was Ban Ki-moon, but I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was Kofi Annan. She ordered like all of the senior staff at UN, of which ex-Prime Minister of New Zealand, Helen Clark, is head of UNDP, Development Program at the UN, just like number 3 at the UN or something. She would have been one of them. They were targeted for biometric collection by the United States, and that was signed off on by Hillary Clinton. So when you talk about CIA in the UN context, I would think that subverting, infiltrating, maybe sabotaging, and appropriating, misappropriating funds and resources of the UN, that's basically what it was. When we read in the last document about how Colin Powell had taken the NSA spying intelligence products and walked in there and convinced the UN, knowing that he would have the votes from the key players, convinced the UN to take on the Iraq debacle, the post-war cleanup, so to speak, and the transition to the new government, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What he was doing is getting the United Nations, getting the entire planet to foot the bill for the US's invasion. So he was like palming the financial responsibility, but also the blood and treasure, as they say, like UN peacekeeping forces, like men, bodies on the ground going in, and UN having to provide. I mean, we just sat here and listened to George Bush. Actually, I'm just going to take this off so I can finish my little rant. We just sat there and listened to George Bush saying, oh, we're going to bring medical support and humanitarian aid and blah, blah, blah to Iraq, like to justify invading Iraq. But they didn't. It was the UN. They went to the UN and they sold it to the UN that the UN needed to come in and take responsibility for the transitional government and for, all the programs and everything. And this is where like the World Food Program and all these other UN programs that we see being rolled, through into Syria and everywhere else, and they are compromised by the CIA. We know they are. We know that, like Serena Shim revealed, that they were, chucking weapons and troops into Syria and whatnot in those. So these things are definitely interrelated. And you wonder, like, if we know that that's what they're doing with UN resources, that can be yet another reason why they want a UN presence.
Yeah.
The US wants a UN presence. We have to look at why do they want that?
Because they know that they can co-opt it, is what it looks like. And they already have. I mean,
I think they'd like to usurp all of the resources that they can and turn them to their own ends. The same as we saw with the Global Network Forum.
definitely.
They said, we have to utilize all of the resources of all the world's intelligence agencies to do what we want to do.
Yeah.
And
that was a one-way street in a lot of ways.
This is the
Yeah.
war version of that. This is the on the ground version of that, rather than signals intelligence or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy to
This
illustrate
is
that.
them
For sure.
wanting to utilize the UN's money, the UN's troops, the UN's infrastructure for the US agenda.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
And as you said earlier, it's for an agenda that's against their charter. So it definitely raises questions about giving the UN any more power if it's just going to be co-opted by the US and by an agenda that's against their charter.
Does Susie and Elizabeth have any keywords worth searching all the docs for? Eben Kim, UN would be a really great one. "36 minutes in, good clip there." Oh, someone's planning our next mini clip. Awesome, go for it, someone. If you think there's a good clip there, go for it. Protect What's True says they probably have something on everyone in the UN and push this agenda. Yeah, or they have someone in everywhere in the UN.
Yeah, as we've looked at before, drawing the line sometimes between all of these groups is really difficult. They just become so intermeshed that it's not the defined, clear dividing lines that you would maybe think that there are.
Cockatoo says they collected biometrics widely at the UN, not just Kofi. And how, it's interesting. It would be interesting to go back and look at when that order from Clinton was to collect all the biometric data on the UN employees and then look at the date of the implementation of Aadhaar database in India, where they are collecting the biometric information of an entire population, and to look at what is the turnaround. What is the turnaround time between them implementing covert biometric collection against diplomats and them employing public, regulated, not regulated in terms of restricted, regulated as in terms of enforced, mandatory biometric collection of the public.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to look that up, I would really like to know how many years difference between Clinton covertly ordering biometric collection on diplomats and Aadhaar, the Indian government, with the help of CIA contractors, forcefully implementing biometric collection in India. Huge. Huge, huge, huge. Okay, I want to check out the rest of that document and see if there is anything else there.
Yeah, no, this is one I definitely want to spend some time on for sure.
SIGINT also helped US, UN, and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan countless peacekeeping operations. Peacekeeping operations are UN operations, but they're saying SIGINT helped the US in their decision making for peacekeeping operations around the world. That reads to me like a tacit admission that they control the UN.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me too.
I mean, like, I'm honestly not meaning to exaggerate this at all, but that basically, I mean, it says right there, SIGINT also helped US and UN state officials in their decisions regarding
helping in the decisions,
peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations.
Yeah.
So basically everything the US has ever done or said at the UN has been based on signals intelligence, sometimes true, sometimes faulty. For example, WMDs, etc. Perhaps sometimes manufactured to be faulty. But now looking to the future, the ambassador recently set clear goals for the next number of months. His deputy is in place and is an experienced user, so she's a customer of the SIGINT. A new Director of Central Intelligence representative is in place. A former presidential daily briefer, and such successor as the NSA representative, such and such is also in place. Fortunately for the US UN, the array of technicians, collectors, analysts, managers, and support personnel. Look,
wow.
This the fact they even call it US UN is making me feel like this is what they can. This is how they think of the UN.
Yeah, and when they say "quote unquote" helping, I mean, I take it as a lot stronger of a word than, I mean, because whatever they're saying, I always interpret as kind of
an understatement.
Yeah, exactly, an understatement of the reality. So if you take them at their word, maybe it's concerning. But if you assume that the reality is a little bit stronger than that, then I think it's extremely concerning.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to that George Bush video and just remind us of what else is in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, someone. This research really does validate a lot, a huge amount. I've learned more about the UN from studying these documents than I've ever learned about the UN from reading God knows how many articles about it.
Yeah.
Evan Kim says UN has 4 documents with 6 instances. Eben, what you want to do is look at what batch release, what document release it's from. So right now we're on batch 4. So any documents that are in 1, 2, or 3, we have already seen. So particularly any documents from the UN that are in release 5 or 6 would be the ones that we have not yet studied. You guys want to tweet out some of like what we're discussing and discovering would be really cool, because as you can see, Elizabeth and I get so caught up in the research we totally like forget to tweet. But we will retweet you if you tweet about the discoveries and the discussion. Okay, let's have a quick look at what George Bush has to say.
Yeah, especially if you tag us, then we'll be able to see your tweets really easily.
To suspend hostilities, to spare himself, Iraq's dictator accepted a series of commitments. Security Council Resolution 688 demanded that the Iraqi regime cease at once the repression of its own people.
So there we go. So they have a long history of passing these resolutions through the UN as pretext.
Including the systematic repression of minorities, which the Council said threatened international peace and security.
I believe he's referring to the chemical attacks against the Kurd. The chemicals came from the United States.
In the region. This 87 demanded that Iraq return.
Okay, so he's going through a chronological order of the past UN resolutions relating to Iraq. So this is him building the case.
All prisoners from Kuwait against Iran, Israel, and Western governments.
Interesting that they're using aggression against Iran as a factor in why they need to invade Iraq.
Yeah.
When they knew full well two things. First of all, that they armed Iraq in the war against Iran. The US was fully complicit in dragging that war out for as long as possible. And also that their strategic planning, their own war planning documents included to invade Iran. They absolutely anticipated that after Iraq fell, that Iran would be next on. But here they are going, Iraq's aggression against Iran is a reason, yet another reason that we should invade Iraq.
Yeah.
It's just really duplicitous.
Yeah, I think most people are going to be aware of our current kind of antagonism toward Iran. So it's completely hypocritical on so many different levels hearing this.
When we hear, look at what he's just said, like, oh God, it would be actually quite an interesting exercise to dismantle the speech. To go back and dismantle the speech retrospectively would be quite an interesting exercise. He's just said, Iraqi dissidents abroad are targeted for murder. Well, what did we see post Snowden's disclosures? We have had how many people from the administration, from the Bush administration, from Obama administration, on television making threats of murder. We've got Hillary Clinton saying Julian Assange should be droned to death. We've got
we've still got the same thing going on
that they're making against Iraq. They are equally guilty of themselves.
Yeah, if not worse, for sure.
In 1993, Iraq attempted to assassinate the Emir of Kuwait.
And how many times did the US attempt to assassinate Fidel Castro?
Yeah.
How many times? But Iraq attempted to assassinate. This is what I mean. The hypocrisy is like next level.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's difficult to even begin.
Former American president. Iraq's government openly praised the attacks of September the 11th. And Al-Qaeda terrorists escaped from Afghanistan and are known to be in.
See, I don't remember Iraq's government ever openly praising the attacks of September 11th.
Yeah, I don't either, but I was probably not as politically aware at the time, so.
I think they had that like psyop of people like down with America, like in the streets or whatever. I don't believe that the Iraqi government put out an official diplomatic statement saying, yeah, it's fantastic that America had like lost the World Trade Center. I'm pretty sure that never happened.
It would have been pretty unwise if they did.
In Iraq. In 1991, the Iraqi regime agreed in Afghanistan and aircraft spray tank.
I don't know if you guys can hear it in the video, but there's like this increasing like level of murmuring in the background.
Interesting. No, I didn't pick that up.
In the
Maybe others
room,
picked that up.
it's like, yeah, the room is starting to hum.
Interesting. So they're trying to, maybe they're discussing what we just did, which is that, did Iraq actually do that? Or, I don't know.
I'm reading it as like the increased activity is like, they can feel that this is building up to something, right? Yeah. Like this is his big, he's just sat there and so far he's spent 11 minutes prattling on about how Iraq is the most evil country in the world. And I think everyone in the room understands that this is going somewhere, and they are communicating that back to their home countries.
Yeah.
Thanks. UN inspectors believe Iraq has produced 2 to 4 times the amount of biological agents it declared. And has.
Well, funny you should mention that as well. Look at all of this is shit. Sorry, but look what happened with David Kelly, Iraq nuclear weapons inspector. I mean, look at what happened. He said they didn't have anything, and he ended up dead.
Yeah.
So when he's just made that claim, he's just said that they have 2 to 4 times the amount of biological precursors that they've said that they have. We now go back to the NSA document and we see them openly stating that that intelligence came from, lo and behold, the NSA.
Yeah, from SIGINT. Yeah, see, I was under the impression it had come more from the CIA, but this is interesting to learn that.
As the US mounted a strategic blah, 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 worked with the UN to garner world support for global war on terrorism, SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq.
So they're basically taking direct responsibility here.
SIGINT proved vital. SIGINT also contributed to the composition of the speech that we're listening to right now on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, that is very, very, very direct involvement in this issue that I was unaware of. So I'm sure there are some others that were also unaware that the NSA was this directly involved in the narrative that led up to the war in Iraq, second one.
Wow, that's just unbelievable.
Yeah, that's definitely something to write about for sure.
Yeah, please. I mean, this document's massive. Okay, let's keep going here.
Has failed to account for more than 3 metric tons of material that could be used to produce biological weapons.
So here's what I see. I see that he has gone through, the chronological order of past resolutions in Iraq.
Yeah.
Which this NSA document has just told us that the NSA has been responsible for going back through UN peacekeeping missions across decades, been responsible for helping to secure these resolutions. So George Bush is sitting here and going, well, we've already got this resolution, that resolution, the other resolution, which were based off NSA reporting. And now we know from this document that this very speech is based off NSA reporting. Now he's in the middle of the speech and it's the meat in the sandwich. And the meat in the sandwich is given the historical context, the manufactured historical context. Now he's giving the meat in the sandwich, which is the biological weapons, the weapons of mass destruction, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Iraq is an imminent threat. So Iraq has been a historical threat. Now Iraq is an imminent threat. And the NSA in these documents that Snowden has provided the world with, the true history, is directly taking responsibility for having provided that intelligence, which we know in retrospect was bullshit.
And not only providing the intelligence, but participating in this speech writing. That's so, I mean, that's drastic.
Well, technically not the writing, but they've provided the content. And they're proud of it. And not only are they proud of it, they consider it to be a historic contribution.
Yeah.
Right now, Iraq is expanding and improving facilities that were used for the production of biological weapons. United Nations inspections also reveal that Iraq likely maintains stockpiles of VX, mustard, and
likely. The UN, likely.
other chemical agents, and that the regime is rebuilding and expanding facilities capable of producing chemical weapons. And in 1995, after 4 years of deception, Iraq finally admitted it had a crash nuclear weapons program prior to the Gulf War. We know now, were it not for that war, the regime in Iraq would likely have possessed a nuclear weapon no later than 1993.
Which means it would probably still exist as a nation, is the sad fact there.
Today, Iraq continues to withhold important information about its nuclear program, weapons design, procurement logs, experiment data.
Right, and so let's just have a quick look at what David Kelly had to say about that, since he was actually one of those inspectors. I actually think he might have been IAEA or something, not UN. Huh. Dr. David Kelly was on a hit list, says UN weapons expert. Mind you, it's the Daily Mail, but where are we at here? The classic example being the insertion in the final week of a claim based on a single source that Iraq's weapon of mass destruction could be deployed within 45 minutes. The intelligence services were unhappy about the 45-minute claim, David said. They believed it was unreliable. In July 2003, is he okay? Right. They could find no evidence of planes, missiles, or equipment relating to any weapons of mass destruction.
It says an MI6 officer said the claim was based partly on wishful thinking.
Pressure was being applied to the Joint Intelligence Committee and its drafters. And this is where Bush and Blair were in cahoots. Yeah. So interesting that it was MI6 that was responsible for that aspect, but NSA are claiming responsibility.
Yeah, I was very much unaware of this level of involvement in the WMD narrative by the NSA.
No, this is post his speech. So his speech was on 12th of September. This is 17th and 18th. So 1 week. So this was manufactured to bolster the case that Bush had already put forward at the UN. On September 19th, Campbell suggested the insertion of a totally false claim that in certain circumstances, Saddam could produce nuclear weapons in as little as a year. Campbell suggested 15 other changes to the dossier. Alistair Campbell. That name is so familiar. What was his role? Wasn't he like Bush's where is it?
Hi. I lost you for a second, or my Zoom meeting disconnected momentarily. I'm not sure what that was.
Doesn't actually say. It's a journalist. Oh, he was a Downing Street press. He was the Downing Street press secretary for Tony Blair. So
Yeah.
the press secretary for a prime minister altered an intelligence report, or
That's amazing.
suggested 15 changes to an intelligence report that cemented Bush's original case for war. Okay, so knowing the British element and that occurred a week after Bush's speech, let's just go back to Bush's speech and finish that off.
An accounting of nuclear materials and documentation of foreign.
Is that screen sharing? I don't think so. Here we go.
No, it's not yet. Okay, now it is.
Assistance. Iraq employs capable nuclear scientists and technicians.
Look, they look openly worried.
Yeah, they did.
Iran looks contemptuous and concerned, but the UAE just looked like outright worried.
It retains physical infrastructure needed to build a nuclear weapon.
Okay, so NSA had already said that Iraq still has the ability to make a nuclear weapon, that they have the physical infrastructure required.
Yeah.
So NSA did provide reporting, false reporting, on the nuclear capacity of Iraq.
Yeah.
But 1 week later, the UK supplied the dossier that said within 45 minutes they can deploy a weapon of mass destruction, and within 1 year they can develop a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, I remember these arguments at the time. They were much talked about, you know.
It's really hard to assess this dispassionately when you know the effect of what they did.
Yeah. And I think the one positive now is that like at the time the internet wasn't what it is today, and so you didn't have the voice of the counter narrative as loud as it can be now with independent media and with
millions marched against the Iraq War. It was one of the biggest protest events, but that was the on the ground protest. What
exactly
is these types of forums. I agree with you there.
Yeah, they could. I guess I'm saying they couldn't directly call out the individual lies maybe as effectively as you can now with stuff like WikiLeaks. You know, that's a new tool that we have compared to that time.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Someone's watching Decipher in 4K on their massive TV.
Yeah, I saw that. I retweeted it. It's an awesome setup. Looks very comfortable.
Wow, thank you guys for doing the tweeting for us. Okay, let's get through the rest of the speech. This is totally, it's enhancing my understanding of, and it's completely altering my understanding of the relationship between the US, the UN, and the UN involvement in this entire process of, and also NSA involvement, definitely changing my perspective in that way. But it's definitely enhancing my understanding of the way that the Iraq War was sold to people, actually sold. This is why they have a press secretary making changes, because it's PR, they're promoting it, they're promoting war, they're promoting the devastation of tens of millions of people. Okay, let's get through the rest of Bush's hideous speech.
Iraq has made several attempts to buy high-strength aluminum tubes used to enrich uranium for a nuclear weapon.
So we've got it all. So we've got the biological weapons, the chemical weapons they've supposedly, had used that they'd been supplied the precursors for by the West. The biological weapons that they're saying are a threat. Now we have the tubes. I remember, I'm sure there was actually a graphic for this at some point.
Should Iraq acquire fissile material, it would be able to build a nuclear weapon within a year.
Ah, so that was in Bush's speech. So it must have been the 45-minute claim that came from Alistair Campbell. But yeah, there you go then. So the NSA, who are openly saying, we gave them the information that Bush said in the speech, this exact speech we're watching, the NSA are bragging about that claim, the nuclear claim.
Yeah.
That within a year they could build a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, and I remember on the ground, the way that was spoken about by the people I knew was that Iraq has nukes. So the interpretation of that is even worse sometimes than what they even said that maybe wasn't true. So.
And the Snowden docs, NSA brag about their historic supplying of SIG-INT to President Bush's September 2002 UN speech, where he sold the false claims that Iraq could build a nuclear weapon within a year. To justify invasion. Amazing. Truly amazing.
Yeah, it's really disappointing to see how a body that is supposed to be beyond the control of any country is so easily co-opted by one country's military interest. So I think that is a good warning for future conflict narratives that are pushed.
Okay. Oh, God, and isn't this the face that certain people were trying to rehabilitate recently?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and the Liberals were saying that they missed George W. Bush or something, I believe was the news headline.
And Iraq's state-controlled media has reported numerous meetings between Saddam Hussein and his nuclear scientists, leaving little doubt about his continued appetite for these weapons.
In the meantime, the US is investing how much in upgrading its nuclear arsenal?
Iraq also possesses a force of Scud-type missiles with ranges beyond the 150 kilometers permitted by the UN.
Can anyone say North Korea?
Work at testing and production facilities shows that Iraq is building more long-range missiles that can inflict mass death throughout the region. In 1990, after Iraq's invasion of Kuwait, the world imposed economic sanctions on Iraq. Those sanctions were maintained after the war to compel the regime's compliance with Security Council resolutions. In time, Iraq was allowed to use oil revenues to—
Okay, so this is, look, so this is the scam. The scam is they get the intelligence for the US mission to the UN, they pass the resolutions, and then they force compliance with the resolutions. But whether or not the state forces complies with them, these guys will say, well, we have intelligence that says that you're not complying with it. The NSA says that you can build a nuclear weapon in a year, even though you don't have any nuclear facilities. The NSA says that you have those tubes you can shoot missiles from, and you have like biological stuff, which is David Kelly and others are saying, no, they actually don't have this. It's a big scam. But then David Kelly ends up dead. So never mind him, back to what the NSA have to say about it. So the resolutions are they're like a trap.
Yeah.
The resolutions give them a pretext.
Definitely.
They create a pretext. I don't know. I feel silly that this is just dawning on me. Like I feel silly. I feel like there must be other much smarter people than me who already realize that it's a giant scam. So the NSA gives them the intelligence to get the resolutions. Then the NSA gives them the so-called intelligence to prove that the resolutions aren't being respected.
Yeah.
And then the NSA gives them the intelligence to invade the country.
Yeah.
And to kill everyone.
And profit.
So the NSA is involved in every, and then the NSA writes internal documents saying what we have done is historic.
Yeah.
What a fantastic job we have done. What a vital role we are playing in this mission.
Yeah, and I remember when this was happening that basically, without it, in not so many words, Saddam Hussein was being compared with Hitler, and the whole expansionist, oh, he's such a threat because he's like Hitler, and the whole hypocrisy of America's expansionist and imperialistic attacks on other countries was conveniently ignored. But so.
Tonight I tweeted out an article that I wrote called Understanding World War III. And in that article, I mapped the movements of Nazi Germany, the invasions and the responses to those invasions. I actually created like data tables to show like the pattern of increasing resistance and to demonstrate that the war itself had been conducted for years and years prior to World War II actually being declared a world war. And when I then went back and mapped the same trajectory of the US invasions throughout the 2000s and the increasing resistance right up to the point where now we have our open resistance in Syria, it follows exactly the same pattern.
Yeah.
And this is me trying to explain to people it's already happening.
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
Now, what we need to look for next is UN resolutions against Syria, Russia, Iran, China, because this is we are unearthing right now in these documents the pattern. The pattern is that the NSA will supply faulty intelligence. We can now make predictions based on what we've just learned.
Yeah, it's extremely valuable.
The NSA will doctor intelligence to get UN resolutions passed. They will use their corruption, the corruption of their relationships in the UN and their SIGINT, global network SIGINT. You know, the UK will chime in with a 45-minute dossier equivalent, modern equivalent of it. They will use the SIGINT to get resolutions passed. Then they will use SIGINT to claim that the resolutions are not being, the terms of the resolutions are not being respected, and to push a case for war.
It's creating this huge sense of consensus that's based on a couple of agencies' interference, and
it's showing that the UN is of crucial importance to whitewashing US imperialism.
Definitely.
The UN is providing the platform and the process by which the US can create a self-justifying record, a false record, a false history.
Definitely.
And as I said before, this completely alters how I see the UN, because the UN is always played off as, you know, it's not their fault, they're doing their best.
Yeah.
But this is just a giant game.
Yeah.
This is just a game. The US is showing up there already knowing what's going to happen. They're showing up there with their botched intelligence, and then they're forcing votes that they've already hedged beforehand, and they're using faulty intelligence supplied by the NSA and the NSA's global network at every step of the way. I never thought I would learn so much studying a George Bush speech and one Snowden file.
Yeah, really.
To buy food. Saddam Hussein has subverted this program, working around the sanctions to buy missile technology and military materials. He blames the suffering of Iraq's people.
So then sanctions. I mean, this is what was just playing on my mind a minute ago, because sanctions is the other tool. So there's resolutions and the sanctions. The resolution is that we're going to impose sanctions, and then they impose the sanctions. Now what they're saying is that he bypassed the sanctions. He took steps to bypass the sanctions, and he may well have done, because if your country's starving, you probably do find, God, I mean, you find money however you can, because you're being deliberately resource starved. You're being deliberately, internally squeezed, your population and your government. I mean, the same thing with like the sanctions that they put against Russia, right? But then what are they doing? They're saying, oh, well, now he's done XYZ to get around the sanctions that have been imposed as a result of the resolutions that were imposed as a result of the NSA reporting in the first place. And again, this is the cycle of the NSA reporting is facilitating every stage of this UN cycle. I feel like I can see like a flow chart in my head of, that like this happens and this happens and this happens, and at every single part, the NSA is in there feeding this data, feeding this intelligence. Never mind if the intelligence has been edited by a press officer. They still call it the intelligence.
On the United Nations, even as he uses his oil wealth to build lavish palaces for himself and to buy arms for his country. By refusing to comply with his own agreements, he bears full guilt for the hunger and misery of innocent Iraqi citizens. In 1991, Iraq promised UN inspectors immediate.
So that was just massive victim blaming. So they imposed the sanctions that resulted in the starvation of the people, and they say, well, actually, it's all Saddam's fault because it's his fault that the sanctions were imposed, even though they're imposed by the resolution that was completely jacked by the US from the outset.
Yeah, and also, oh, never mind. Thought left me. Don't worry about it. That happens sometimes.
Immediate and unrestricted access to verify Iraq's commitment to rid itself of weapons of mass destruction and long-range missiles. Iraq broke this.
Can you hear the room? Can you hear the background noise yet? It's getting even louder.
Here, play it again.
Promise.
Oh yeah, I can now.
Spending 7 years deceiving, evading, and harassing UN inspectors before ceasing cooperation entirely. Regime cooperate fully with inspectors.
It reminds me as well of the sort of the current situation where you have, quote, intelligence community consensus about the whole alleged Russian interference or whatever, and it just shows that you can't trust that, So if you can't trust it here, why would you trust it now?
One of the most fascinating things for me is watching these the looks on the faces of the diplomats of the different countries. Like you just saw France, and France looked like, yeah, this is everything we expected rolling out like before us. So, I mean, the key partners of the US who had already colluded, who the US already knew, they're just sitting there like, yep. You see Russia is like paying like great attention. I don't know if you guys saw that, there was just a shot of the Russian Federation diplomats, and they are writing and talking and like looking like very paying a lot of attention. You see the Arab countries are just like, holy crap, what's going on here? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I mean, I think their relationship has changed. It suggests a different dynamic in the relationship.
That's true, yeah.
To the current day, that UAE, Qatar, all of them have been in the US pocket for a long time. But back in 2002, it seems that maybe they were not as in the know. Okay, I think this is what I'm trying to say. You can tell the degree by which they had access to the intelligence prior to the speech by the way that they are reacting to the speech.
Yeah.
So the Arab countries are not in the 41 eyes, or certainly weren't in the 43 eyes in 2002. So they are hearing this crap roll off Bush's tongue for the first time. Those who were in the circle or even closer to the circle, you know, the top European countries and the Five Eyes, knew.
Yeah.
They knew this before it happened. So you can see who was surprised by it and who was just watching it play out exactly as their own spies had assured them it would.
Yeah, just ticking off the boxes as he's going down the points of the speech almost. Just mentally kind of, yeah.
The Security Council again renewed that demand in 1994 and twice more in 1996, deploring Iraq's clear violations of its obligations. The Security Council cloak of secrecy.
Let's go back a little bit there. That's Colin Powell.
Since the last UN inspector set foot in Iraq. 4 years for the Iraqi regime to plan and to build and to test behind the cloak.
Did you see the guy right there?
Yeah.
Did you see him just shaking his head like this?
Of secrecy.
Yeah. I see that.
We know that Saddam Hussein pursued weapons of mass murder even when inspectors were in his country. Are we to assume that he stopped when they left?
Look at them.
Not happy.
He looks like you are so full of shit. And
yeah.
He looks like, oh my God, they actually are going to invade us.
Like just disbelief on that guy's face. Yeah, and then the one in the back looked extremely worried, concerned.
Yeah, exactly. That is, if there's anything historic about this speech, this is what's historic.
Yeah, like, is this a joke? Almost.
History.
And there's China.
Yeah. They look very, very somber as well, actually.
China look like these batshit Americans, excuse me,
yeah.
realizing, but China looks like these batshit Americans are going to invade Iraq and plunder it, but we're China, so they can't touch us. That's my interpretation of that. Because they don't look threatened, but they also look resolute.
Yeah.
Also, it should be noted that it said that these resolutions were passed unanimously. And that we go back to the document and it says, let me just share screen again. I'm sure it said unanimous resolutions. Was it two or multiple unanimously?
I think it was multiple.
Once again, the US mounted as blah, blah, blah. SIGINT proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq.
Yeah.
So we would need to look up and see what are the 2 Security Council resolutions that were a result of the speech. And I bet that someone would be able to find that. Cockatoo, stop trolling Elizabeth.
What I do?
He says you're having brain fades.
Oh, that one time, yeah. No, yeah, all I was going to say there is I was going to point out the connection to the current situation with Russian and quote unquote hacking and the supposed intelligence community consensus that had to be walked back from 17 different agencies to 3 and is still quoted as 17, and it's not based on any evidence, all of that. And you can compare that to the faulty intelligence in 2002, 2003.
Oh, wow. Oh God, yet again, I want to read right through the chat because you guys put such awesome stuff in it. So we have here, I'm just going to catch up before there's too much chat. This one has been so good, says Matt. Thank you. Well, yeah, if you come in, it's kind of like in some ways it's horrifying and terrifying because this is the state of our world that we're discovering in these documents how this world is actually run, how wars are run. Like I'm learning more about war and how wars are what's I want to say like what
Instigated.
No, how they are like whitewashed, but whitewashed even more than whitewashed. How they are like clinically like they're like
sanitizing it, maybe.
Sanitized. Thank you. I'm learning about how wars are diplomatically sanitized, how the international community is manipulated, how the UN is a vehicle for war. It is not a vehicle for peace.
Yeah.
They are not taking NSA data and saying, we want to pass a resolution for peace. We want to pass a resolution for peace. We want to pass a resolution for peace. They want to pass resolutions for sanctions. They want to pass resolutions to get in for their inspections. They want to pass resolutions to create pretext for conflict. They are not passing resolutions to end conflict. When they do pass resolutions to end conflict, it's always in the context of temporarily ceasing hostilities. We will have a ceasefire. It will
in which they can then control that situation. You know, that's not.
Exactly. And all it does is allay things temporarily. And I've been told previously and learned previously that they use ceasefires to resupply their forces.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And have a ceasefire for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks so that they can put a bunch more world food trucks with weapons and men into the places they want them to be in. So even resolutions for temporary peace become a vehicle for war. As far as I can tell, almost everything that's going through the Security Council, and we'd have to go and study all the resolutions because I could be wrong, but it seems like the vast majority are here to support war. This structure is existing to support war, to facilitate war.
Yeah.
And to facilitate nation building, as we learned about from the previous documents. Okay, so moving along, let's just get back to the chat. Incredible.
Definitely.
If they, now look, here's the smartest thing I've read all night from someone. If they can keep everyone fighting each other over Trump's tweets, they can continue to advance these goals while we fight about sides. This is the exact point I've been trying to make. Someone said today, oh, Flynn is going to testify against Trump, grab your popcorn. And I thought to myself, like, I just finished reading about how Israel was bombing the Iranian bases in Syria. I'm thinking, yeah, so this is the whole agenda. They want you to grab your popcorn. You're supposed to be grabbing your popcorn, eating it while you watch Fox TV or whatever cable news network tell you about what's the latest in X versus Y in Washington, D.C. In the meantime, they're blowing up bases in Syria. In the meantime, World War III is progressing, but they don't want you to know about that. They don't want you to worry about that. They just want you to watch reality television, politics. It's still The Apprentice.
Yeah.
Is Trump going to be fired? Is the director of The Apprentice going to be, is the host of The Apprentice going to be fired? Is he the next contestant to be voted off the island? Will he have to get his tiki torch and leave?
Yeah.
Grab your popcorn. Have an argument about it with your neighbor, your sister, your mother, your husband. Sit there and eat your popcorn and argue about whether he will be voted off the island. In the meantime, we'll just drop another 26,000 bombs on Afghanistan, Iraq, and whatever. We'll drop the mother of all bombs. Oh God, I can't help but go on a massive anti-war rant. It's impossible.
Yeah, we'll keep supplies out of Yemen, all of it. Yeah.
Ibn Kim says that he's got one request, and that's to go by the date or name of the article. I'm not really sure what you mean there. How do you want us to do that? Like the process here is that we read these documents together and then we go and write them up. And if you go to decipheru.com, you'll see links to every single article with the exact points that we're making about the contents of that article. So you will always be able to see the source reference for what we're discussing.
Yeah, and when we're reading through the documents one by one, you can also see the title of them when we start on them. So if you go and look through the Snowden files from the Intercept, you should be able to match up the title of what we're reading with the files that they present. So
correct. We are on release 4, not release 5. We have 2 more, aren't we? Yes, we must.
Yeah, no, we're still in batch 4.
Correct. Crocodile says Alistair Campbell was Tony Blair's minder. Well, you know what? There's a very high probability that Alistair Campbell was not just a PR guy, but actually was MI5 or MI6 or something like that. Because this is what we've seen, is that those key positions of power are taken by agents of the state.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But what he did was pure evil. Manufacturing, or what they call it, sexing up intelligence.
Yeah, there's just a huge overlap between the intelligence agencies and the PR and the government positions like that. So
Spooge is saying all this comes back to the UK. Well, I used to think that, because I used to think, well, if the US is putting bases on Commonwealth territory, the UK must be complicit. Then I discovered that post-World War II, the UK had over 100 US military facilities supplanted on its soil. So it seems that the price of the US bailing the UK out of World War II was UK national sovereignty, because the UK does not have over 100 military facilities on the United States soil. The United States does not allow foreign countries to have bases on its soil. I think there's 2 exceptions, but they're not actually bases as such. They're like joint ventures. So once I realized that there is over 100 US military facilities on UK soil, I understood why the US can have NSA facilities on New Zealand soil when New Zealand is a Commonwealth country, because our populations are still taught, we aren't American, we're not part of the American Empire, we're part of the Commonwealth, you know, UK is our overlords, Queen of England, blah, blah, blah. No, as far as I can tell, somewhere along the way, someone did a deal which said, hey, Queen of England, you get to keep all your money and your jewels, you get to keep all your European bank accounts and your cousins and your everything else, and you get to have your ceremonies and put your crown on your head and have a wedding every 20 years. But guess what? We run the show. We've got 100 military bases on your soil, and your intelligence agencies work with us. We'll call it a special relationship. Sign this agreement. And voila, we have the UK-USA agreement. When was the UK-USA agreement signed? In the 40s.
yeah.
Immediately preceding the US establishing over 100 military bases. So no, the UK is not the boss in this relationship. The boss is the country that has all of the facilities on the soil of the other country.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's going to be interesting as China gains power in the world. It's going to be interesting to see if they take over in any way, sort of like that, in the influence in the UN and all this sort of thing.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to burst out laughing, but Spooge YouTube just said, on behalf of the massive majority of Brits, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, and so many times it's not what the country wants, it's what their leaders want. And sometimes it's not even the elected leaders that are doing this. So, you know, I don't think the blame is entirely on the citizens in this situation.
Look, I think that I made this point in Understanding World War III, though I'm not sure if I made it well enough. And that's that the current world order that we live with, not the new world order they keep prattling on about for the last 20 years, but the current world order, where the US has 100 military facilities in the UK, et cetera, and the Five Eyes UK-USA agreement. This is the direct result of World War II. So World War III will determine the next world order.
Yeah, true.
World War III will determine the hierarchy, the global hierarchy, where the power lies, where the resources lie. It will determine who has military bases in whose country.
Yeah.
If the US overextends itself, if it steps into the graveyard of all empires, as it seems to want to do, and it can no longer support its own weight, the day that it can no longer staff its 1,000 military bases or finance them, the empire crumbles, whether that's as a result of war or economics or technology or anything else, no one knows. But if that day comes, there will be an entire new global order, just as the global order changed so dramatically in the space of 1933 to 1945, 12 years. It took 12 years for the global order to shift in World War II. If World War III progresses to an actual land invasion of Iran or Russia, or China, certainly China, that's the game changer moment. And the world that comes out of that war will not be the world that went into it. Guaranteed. There'll be entire countries that will not exist anymore. That's my prediction. I'm thinking of certain small countries that literally will cease to exist and will be carved up amongst the victors. The same as we saw happen post-World War II. The victors of the World War will decide the borders of the new world.
Yeah, and the same in World War I. I mean, any conflicts on that scale.
Evan Kim has discovered the UN Peacekeeping in Sub-Saharan Africa, a growth industry document.
Yeah, thank you all for researching. I really appreciate it.
Cockatoo says, yes, Suzie, it's a bloody great pantomime. He's talking about the UN, and it is. It's pantomime.
Yeah.
It's theatre, political theatre.
Perfect word.
And yet Cacti Juice is saying that the war on terror became the pretext for preemptive invasion, which is true.
Yeah.
A very good point. Very good point. History is written by the winners, indeed. Cockatoo says, Suzie, the creepy thing about this is the UN resolutions were snuck past Russia and China, but I think those days are over. I think those days are over too. I think that Russia has drawn a pretty clear line in the sand in Syria and said no more. You will not eat these countries alive anymore. Your domino effect has hit a brick wall. Cockatoo, I want to vomit. Me too. It is sickening. It's impossible. You can't, not if you're a like feeling person, you can't separate your feelings when you're literally watching and the way they conduct themselves as they're doing it is sickening. Send popcorn to the children of your men, says Cockatoo. Protect what's true. How is Snowden keeping safe? These show more reasons why they must despise him. Protect what's true. This is why I keep saying to anybody who doubts the veracity of Snowden, have you read the documents? And they say to me, oh, well, yes, I've read all of the articles that were reported in the New York Times and the Washington Post. And I say, no, have you read the documents? And they're like, well, no, but I'm across all of the reporting. I know about everything he released. And I'm like, have you read the documents? And the answer invariably is no, they haven't. They haven't sat here and read the documents. But they will say Snowden is this, Snowden is that, Snowden is a secret CIA op, blah, 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 blah. Nobody who is reading these documents could ever believe that Snowden is a fake, because look at what's in them. Look at the importance of these things that we're discussing. It is redefining our entire understanding of geopolitics. And there's no way that the US would want people knowing any of this. And when you read it, you start to understand why they bring down a president's plane trying to find him, why they make the threats on TV that they make and whatever else. So these documents exonerate any conspiracy theory about why Snowden leaked them.
Definitely.
They truly exonerate him. They not only that, they look what he's showing us. He's like, this isn't beyond like just they're spying on us. This is a breach of our privacy, which it was a horrific breach of our privacy. I certainly felt an extremely horrific breach of my personal privacy and domestic privacy as a target in New Zealand. I thought that was a big deal. But this stuff that we're reading is even bigger. It's even bigger. Yeah. This is the deaths of tens of millions of people. This is the pretext for wars that have devastated entire countries. Yeah. This is even beyond them spying on us. This is them killing people, killing entire generations of people. And we're learning how they got away with it.
Yeah.
We're learning how they did it and how they got away with it.
And hopefully we can use it to confront any the times it's used in the current and in the future.
Blair was never out of Campbell's sight, Cockatoo says, which is why he thinks there was a handler. Britain will settle its World War II debts to the US and Canada when it pays 2 final instalments before the close of 2006, the Treasury has said. So Britain actually had to pay reparations to the United States. Cockatoo, can we get some links on that, please? I would like more information about that. This is, I mean, talk about hidden knowledge. This is literally hidden knowledge that the UK empire is subservient, economically and militarily subservient. Cacti juice, there is a reason that the US does not have a draft anymore.
That's a really good point.
That's an intriguing point. Are you referring to it using the UN peacekeeping resources? What do you mean by there's a or are you talking about privatization? Are you saying that privatization of military forces is to prevent the necessity of a draft? I would like to hear more about what you think about that, Cacti Juice. Cockatoo says there were 50 installments since 1950 of payments from the UK to the US. USA has operational control over UK's Trident deterrent, which is the nuclear ships. So the US is in fact operating the UK's nuclear vessels, which are apparently like ancient for like they're like from the 70s and all running ancient software and ancient hardware. Spooge says, well, Spooge, did you make your name Spooge just so that I have to say Spooge all the time? I'm
sure I did.
Spooge says World War III is being fought now with AI. I'm not an expert on cyber war, but it seems that in a way, cyber war is being fought to prevent or in lieu of, or to avert the possibility of a ground war of World War III. It seems like at the moment that we see old warfare, legacy, we have legacy media. I think we have legacy warfare. I think that we have legacy military, legacy weaponry, legacy armies, legacy warfare, legacy tactics. Legacy warfare is an army invading space physically. But it seems to me that cyber war is almost trying to outpace that. The question is the drones, because the drones bridge both worlds. They bridge cyber war and legacy warfare. Did I just coin a new term, legacy warfare? But it seems to make perfect sense to me.
Yeah, I think you did.
Oh, look, what kills me, all of this was going on 14 plus years ago. Technology has advanced incredibly fast. What we're seeing now in these documents are likely legacy systems now, Eben Kim said. I didn't read that before I just made my little lecture about legacy warfare. But yeah, he's right. What's in the documents is legacy systems. But also what we see, Eben, is that in the documents, the systems that they're describing were extremely advanced for the year. So when they're talking, they have all the web conferencing software and facilities that we enjoy, you know, in present times in like 2002. So they were well ahead, well ahead. Protect what's true. Snowden is an amazing person. I agree with you. I love Snowden. November 8th, 2002, the Security Council passed Resolution 1441. Now we've seen references to that by a unanimous 15-0 vote. Russia, China, France, and Arab states such as Syria voted in favor. And Cockatoo has given a link to the details of the reparations, UK reparations to USA. Okay, guys, let's keep going. I didn't expect to spend like more than half an episode on this one document, but I think it definitely warrants that level of attention.
Definitely.
So let's go back to the maniac's speech.
The logic and the facts lead to one conclusion. Saddam Hussein's regime is a grave and gathering danger. To suggest otherwise is to hope against the evidence.
So the evidence. And that evidence is the evidence that the NSA brags about having compiled for this very speech.
To assume this regime's good faith is to bet the lives of millions and the peace of the
Right, except the lives of millions are the lives of the millions lost in Iraq.
world in a reckless gamble. We owe it to all our citizens to do everything in our power to prevent that day from coming. Will it be irrelevant? The United States helped found the United Nations. We want the United Nations.
How's that for a quote? I'm just going to back up a little bit.
Or will it be irrelevant?
I think
Iraq has answered a decade of UN demands with a decade of defiance.
Look, he's actually making a threat here to the UN. He's actually threatening that the UN will become irrelevant if the UN doesn't do what the US wants it to do. And then he backs that up by saying, by the way, the US helped start the UN. I'm just going to replay that part because I think it's really significant. To be honest with you, I think Elizabeth, that this justifies an entire article. This whole thing needs to be revisited. People need to remember this. They need to remember this, and they need to understand how this happened.
Yeah, I agree.
It didn't just happen because some idiot, what's her face in the New York Times said, yeah, Iraq has WMDs. We've forgotten the history.
It's true.
Or not just forgot, we haven't forgotten the history. We have failed to examine the extent of the process by which this war was solved. Because we have all been acting like it was just the MSM.
Yeah.
Some stupid, corrupt, incompetent reporters backed up crazy ass Cheney and Bush, and therefore all these people died. No. This is about way more than just the media. The media are just one arm.
But also, I mean, if they're constructing the narrative of the intelligence itself to sell this war, then the mainstream it affects directly what the mainstream media reports. So you can blame the mainstream part of the mainstream media reporting on the way that the NSA framed its presentation of the intelligence that it said that it had.
It would be so fascinating. It would be so fascinating to go and analyze the cases that were made by those reporters in New York Times and what else for the invasion of Iraq. Mm-hmm. Analyze if they sequentially follow the cases as outlined to the UN. Like as he went back, through the chronological order of the resolutions, and he went through the current, at that time, current NSA SIGINT reporting. And now he's going through the UN, the relevance issue of the UN and the history of is this, because it's so formulaic. Like when we're sitting here watching it, it's so obvious to me that it's formulaic. And I'd be very interested to see if that formula plays out across the media justifications, the media case that was built. Because I have a gut feeling that it does. I have a gut feeling you'll find that it's systematic and that you'll find each of those elements.
Yeah, which strengthens, I think, what you're saying, which is that this is the fundamental core issue, is the way that the NSA was able to craft this narrative, and then the media reported on the narrative that had been crafted. So you're not the center of the blame there, or responsibility is with the intelligence agencies, not so much the media that's just reporting their line that's given to them by the intelligence people. So
Bush comes across to me as extremely rehearsed in this speech.
Yeah, That was the other thing I was thinking as you're talking about the way that this has been structured, is that it's probably easy for somebody like Bush to memorize that type of very simple structure where you have history, current issues, what we have to do, and support that.
And its construction is academic.
Yeah.
The construction of it is like a high level, like PhD paper, right? The language isn't. He's not using highly technical language. They've kept it really simple, but the construction, the structure of it is very, very high level academic. This is like something I would expect from like Rand Corporation, that kind of thing, like, you know, those types of people. But he is delivering it like he's rehearsed it 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, because I mean, how many people talk about how Bush is stupid, Bush is of inferior intelligence, Bush, you know, his off the cuff comments and his lack of understanding, and he can barely string a sentence together. But here he is delivering like this high level 30-minute speech. And he's got it all. He's got the pregnant pauses for effect. He's got the statements of conviction. He's got like everything. It's like someone has literally sat with him and drilled him through the speech.
Yeah, word by word.
It doesn't look like he's reading it off the teleprompter, like he's reading it off the cards. He's like had it drilled into him.
Definitely.
All the world now faces a test, and the United Nations a difficult and defining moment. Are Security Council resolutions to be honored and enforced, or cast aside without consequence?
And it's so weird how he keeps smiling. Every time he lies, he does a little smile.
Yeah.
Did you notice that?
Yeah, definitely.
Or will they be cast aside without consequence? Smile. Ugh, it's freaky.
The United Nations serve the purpose of its founding, or will it be irrelevant? The United States helped found the...
Well, see, that's so like, will the UN serve the purpose of its founding? Makes me wonder what the real purpose of its founding was, not the one recorded in its charter.
Absolutely.
The purpose of its founding, I still haven't found the right word. It's not sanitized. Sanitized is a lot closer to it, but I'm trying to find something else. Like, not authenticates. It authenticates war. It's like validates. It does sanitize, but it also validates wars. It's validating the act of war.
Yeah.
And it's it's supposed to be the world's foremost anti-war organization that is providing that validation.
Yeah.
The United Nations. We want the United Nations to be effective and respectful and successful. We want the resolution.
Respectful. What the hell? Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did.
I think he was supposed to say respected.
Probably, yeah. That makes sense.
We want that. Listen to that again. That was a massive Freudian slip. That was a massive Freudian slip.
Will it be irrelevant? The United States helped found the United Nations. We want the United Nations to be effective and respectful and successful.
Effective, respectful, and successful. Respectful of who? That makes no sense whatsoever.
No, I think he messed up because respectful and successful rhyme, and so he's kind of flipped them to like
He was supposed to say respected.
Yeah.
Respect.
But then the fact that successful then followed, he probably just word saladed them together. So.
Or he wants the UN to be respectful to the US, but
yeah.
And let that one slip.
We want the resolutions of the world's most important multilateral body to be enforced. And
right, so they get the resolutions passed by the world's most important multilateral body so that they can then demand enforcement and then put the entire reputation and existence of the UN on the line if they won't do it.
Yeah.
Right now, those resolutions are being unilaterally subverted by the Iraqi regime. Our partnership of nations can meet the test before us by making clear what we now expect of the Iraqi regime. If the Iraqi regime wishes peace, it will immediately and unconditionally forswear, disclose, and remove or destroy all weapons of mass destruction.
But even if it did that, bearing in mind that they didn't actually exist, the NSA will then provide intelligence saying, oh, no, this cat food factory is actually a chemical weapons facility and therefore they have violated this resolution, and off we go back to war.
Long-range missiles and all related material. These issues, as required by Security Council property, accept liability for losses resulting from the invasion of Kuwait, and fully cooperate with international efforts to resolve these issues, as required by Security Council resolutions. The United States has no quarrel with the Iraqi people.
Right.
For too long in silent captivity.
Oh, look how angry he was at that.
Yeah, really.
For the Iraqi people is a great moral cause and a great strategic goal. People of Iraq deserve it. The security of all nations requires it. Free societies do not intimidate through cruelty and conquest.
How can I even say that? How can I even say those words?
Oh yeah, and you were saying that about this being a Freudian slip. And I believe it was, what was it? I think it was Redacted Tonight that tweeted recently, or WikiLeaks, I forget which, that tweeted a whole compilation of the Freudian slips of leaders admitting the actual intention. So that reminds me a lot of that.
You're right, and there was tons of them. There's tons of examples of them actually, you know, saying what things,
saying what they meant by accident.
Right,
yeah,
when they were not supposed to be saying that.
And open societies do not threaten the world with mass murder.
Yeah, no, that one really got me. I mean, it's really difficult because pretty much every single phrase he's saying is hypocritical.
Open societies do not threaten the world with mass murder.
He says with a straight face, without a pause.
We will turn Iraq into a car park, into a parking lot. Remember that?
Yeah.
The United States supports political and economic liberty. Arabia, Bahrain, and Israel.
Look at them just like shaking their heads.
After everything we have just read in these documents about them openly admitting they're using their military for economic hegemony, and now he's saying we support economic liberty. It's a literal lie. It is the total opposite of reality.
They want to bring freedom bombs and liberate everyone by killing them. So.
Look, he's actually laughing.
Yeah, no, they're not buying one phrase of it, and I don't blame them.
He's actually laughing.
His regime once ordered the killing of every person between the ages of 15 and 70 in certain Kurdish villages.
Okay, now ordered the killing of everyone between, that sounds suspiciously like the US military definition of military age males, where anyone who's between the age of 15 and whatever is deemed an enemy combatant, regardless of whether or not they've ever touched a gun in their life or ever been engaged in any military action.
Yeah. Yeah, and going through this whole thing too, like I'm reminded, we just it's really hit at least the independent news recently about the slaves being sold in Libya, which is also largely a result of our actions there. So I just, the examples of this type of thing being absolutely evil in reality when we go claim that we're liberating people is just, I mean, there's so many examples, practically endless. So
the Iraqi people deserve it, he just said.
yeah.
He said the Iraqi people deserve for us to invade Iraq.
Yeah.
For their liberation.
Yeah, and I think with this, it's really obvious that helping a people is being used to sell killing a people. And I think that in other situations, people don't realize that quite as clearly, like when we have aid groups going into a wrecked area and they actually exploit the area as opposed to helping. So there are a lot of different variations of this same hypocrisy being sold to people, whether it's the UN, the US, aid groups, NGOs, whatever.
And all of his economic liberty, we believe in economic liberty. What was the first thing that they did? They secured the oil fields.
Yeah. Or the poppy fields in Afghanistan, or, you know, whatever the resources are that they want. So
they housed themselves in Saddam's mansions. They took over Saddam's mansions and ran their embassy out of there. They didn't get a bunch of homeless Iraqi people and say, look, you paid for this mansion. Now here you go, you can live in it. They stole them, basically. They invaded them literally and operated out of them. They kept the most plush pieces of land and buildings for themselves in their own use.
Is in northern Iraq. He has gassed many Iranians and 40 Iraqi villages.
And bearing in mind, that was the Iranian delegation that was just openly laughing at the ridiculousness of what he was saying. Yet here he is once again banging on about the poor Iranians.
My nation will work with the UN Security Council to meet our common challenge. If Iraq's regime defies us again, the world must move deliberately, decisively to hold Iraq to account. The people of Iraq will continue to live in brutal submission. September the 11th would be a prelude to far greater horrors.
Okay, what was that?
And if an emboldened regime were to supply these weapons to terrorist allies,
More scaremongering.
then the attacks of September the 11th would be a prelude to far greater horrors.
Yeah, and it's really common historically for wars to be, just for countries to obviously based on their own power go in and rape, pillage, and destroy countries. But now we're reaching a stage where that has been turned into, it has to be now sold under this moral banner. And I don't know how many times that used to happen, but it's definitely, it's the same old thing that's being masked in new language. That's all.
To validate and qualify their wars, to access the resources and manpower of the international community so they don't have to pay for it all themselves. But I'm sure they'll make money off it. I mean, who's the UN hiring to do this stuff?
DynCorp.
They passed the UN resolution that the UN will take on a peacekeeping mission. Who are they paying to do that?
Yeah.
Who's supplying? It's the Halliburtons. Who's supplying all the goods on the ground? Who's feeding the peacekeepers? Who's housing them? Where are the tents coming from? Where are the marquees or whatever?
Yeah.
The UN ends up paying the US for the war that the US instigated. It's like, it's grand larceny on the scale of like billions, if not trillions.
Definitely.
Okay, I want to get through this horrific video because it's at the same time, it's like really important, but at the same time, it's also horrible.
Neither of these outcomes is certain. Both have been set before us. Delegates to the United Nations, you have the power to make that stand as well.
But they already knew who was going to vote before this.
Thank you very much.
President Bush.
So I was just wondering, who is it that's actually enthusiastically clapping for that nonsense? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did. The UK.
The UK.
were the ones that were enthusiastically clapping. I'm sure a couple of other
You had Japan doing its dutiful, we are US servants, we lost World War II, so we're clapping for you like this. And then you had Iraq like, are you fucking kidding? Of course we're not going to clap. And then you had the UK going, hurrah, hurrah, hurrah. And this is the UK who 7 days later are putting out a bullshit claim about in 45 minutes weapons of mass destruction can be launched by Iraq. Okay.
Like, we'll support you. We'll support you as long as we get our cut.
There's enough of that horror story. So having just gone through that video, I mean, obviously I skipped through a lot of it, but certainly enough, we looked at enough to see the sequence, the ordering of the points, the topics that were brought up. I'm just going to go back to that document now, and I just want us to have another read of it again, and then we will do some question and answer time and finish up today.
Yeah.
I'm amazed for this. I want to go through the whole thing again. From the account manager for the US mission to the UN. It's an account manager because the US mission to the UN is a customer of the NSA. And this person is in charge of the NSA's supply of information to the US mission to the UN. And we know that the NSA has a full-time staff member physically with the US mission to the UN at all times.
Yeah.
This is 31st of August 2004. So this is post-invasion of Iraq by a year and a bit. Was it February 2003? When did they actually?
Yeah, it was really early. It was either
something like that, early 2003. So it's like roughly a year and a half later. Only a number of weeks ago, Ambassador John Negroponte, until then the US representative to the United Nations, was nominated, confirmed. So this guy is a war criminal. A Latin American death squad ordering war criminal. Nominated, confirmed, and sent to Baghdad as the new US ambassador.
To Iraq.
The old ambassador was then nominated to be the ambassador to the IAEA, which is responsible for weapons inspections, specifically nuclear. So he would be taking his knowledge of on the ground in Iraq to that purpose. Director of Central Intelligence Representative at US UN. So the CIA has a representative at the US UN mission, and the NSA has a representative at the US UN mission. And Negroponte was, up until 2004, the ambassador to them. He was the representative at the US UN mission. So during the time that Bush made this speech, we have Negroponte as the actual representative. We have NSA and CIA alongside him there. Before all that was announced, our very own NSA representative, okay, so they're just talking about who is left, who is leaving. They've done their job basically, and now they're being promoted off elsewhere. And they switched buildings. Before the move, they got briefed up to a few minutes prior to every Security Council meeting because they were situated directly across the street from the UN. The Negroponte years at the US UN mission proved momentous and historic. SIGINT's support to US UN and the State Department in support of US goals in the UN Security Council. So it's very open there. It's not in support of the integrity of the UN or of the charter of the UN, but in support of US goals, where the strategic intent of nations amalgamates into tactical diplomatic maneuvering, which is a funny way, a flowery way of saying where what the strategic intent of nations as a collective is supposed to be the strategic intent of the UN itself. But what they're saying is that actually in the Security Council, the strategic intent of the individual nations is involved in diplomatic or is affected by diplomatic maneuvering. So this is where they go to push their own agenda, not to push the UN to work together for the benefit of the UN, but to push their own agenda. proved, shall we say, secretly historic. Now, even just the fact that they just use the words, shall we say, like it's a very self-satisfied way of, you know, shall we say we're secretly historic, like,
Yeah.
because no one else is saying it, because we don't want to take public credit for this. But we want you guys to know, look at us and what we do, and we change the world. We impact world events. We influence the international stage. We control the UN. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, they're wanting to flaunt their own power, but they're not wanting to take public responsibility for manipulating this narrative.
Exactly. Bingo, you just summarized it perfectly. A few days before he was sworn in as that representative, blah, blah, 9/11 happened. The morning after the attacks, the UN Security Council and the UN General Assembly met amid the smouldering smell that permeated the chambers to approve the resolutions condemning the attacks. I would love to know what is in those resolutions, because those resolutions must not have been just a statement of consolation. Those resolutions must have contained a commitment to take military action against those who perpetuated the attack.
Yeah.
Remember earlier in the session, I just said, I don't know why they would have resolutions, and it's just come to me. They would have resolutions because those resolutions would include mandates for counterattack. And those mandates for counterattack would explain why Russia, China, and others voted for the resolution. It would explain why the later resolutions were unanimous, because they would have been respecting terms of prior resolutions.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that because I haven't gone and read those resolutions post 9/11, but I can feel in my bones. And I think we do need to.
It's a good lead.
Check that out. What, can someone add this to our list? What are the contents? What are the major points of the resolutions, the post 9/11 resolutions? What was their general purpose? It obviously wasn't just a solidarity statement. If it was, it wouldn't have needed to be a resolution. A resolution is where you resolve to take an action. What action was resolved to be taken?
Yeah, I'm making a note right now to check that out.
To approve resolutions condemning the attack, as the US mounted a strategic response to these attacks, which I assume is Afghanistan at this point, and worked with the UN to garner world support for the global war on terrorism. Worked with the UN to get support for the war on terrorism. SIDToday proved vital in the US negotiations that resulted in 2 key and unanimously approved Security Council resolutions on Iraq. SIDToday also contributed to the composition of that speech that we just watched at the UN General Assembly in September of 2002, and to Secretary Powell's presentation to the Security Council. Now that is the one that had the graphics. Remember when Powell stood up there and he had the, like, this is how far they are, you know, to creating the bomb. Like, wasn't it even like a photo of it was like a cartoon of a bomb or something, and they were like you know, 3/4 of the way up.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Right.
That's like
No,
a famous.
no, I don't, but that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah. He had props. He actually stood there with props as he delivered the speech.
Yeah, no, now I do. I remember that. Yeah.
And to Secretary Powell's presentation to the on the case against the Iraqi dictator, among other events. Among other events, how did I miss that the first time? SIDToday proved vital to the 2 unanimously approved Security Council resolutions, which came several years after the initial resolutions post September 11. The 2 unanimously approved resolutions, President Bush's speech to the UN in September 2002, and Secretary Powell's speech and other events. Now, what would other events be? Would other events be the 7 days later UK 45-minute claim from Alistair Campbell and MI6? SIGINT also helped US, UN and state officials in their decisions regarding Afghanistan, countless peacekeeping operations around the world, Africa, Sudan, and so many other situations, which is just ratifying that this is a periodic, systematic undertaking by the NSA in support of any global conflict that the US wants to have.
Yeah, and so many tragedies and human rights abuses happened in Africa, especially with the UN presence there.
Fortunately for the mission to the UN, the array of technicians, collectors, analysts, managers, and support personnel across NSA that make focused and responsive SIGINT support to them possible has not changed much. The NSA will continue providing incredible support to the US mission to the UN. Okay. That's enough to make me feel sick. I'm actually really grateful and happy to leave it there tonight. Yet again, I feel like we've just stumbled across something massive and historic. Historic for different reasons than the NSA is describing it as historic.
Definitely.
Guys, what do you think about this? Let's have a look at our chat. Kathy B says at age 18, my sons had to register with the Selective Service. If they don't, they cannot apply for federal student loans and such.
Yeah.
So that actually is still a form of draft.
Yeah, it's like it's a registry in case of a draft.
If there is an all-out war, they will be called, says Kathy B.
Yeah.
Oh, Kathy, I'm so glad that you joined us. I don't know if you're still with us, but thank you very much. I'm really happy that you found this. Character Juice says the circle, I was talking about the life cycle of this. He's saying it's the life cycle, the circle of propaganda.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Matt Monroe says that Bush sounds like the UN's daddy reprimanding them. He basically was openly bullying them. And if you don't do what we say, you will be, what did he say, irrelevant. You'll be irrelevant. Your resolutions that we tricked you into passing won't mean anything if you don't follow up on them by doing what we tell you to do. Someone thank you for the pirate pad for tonight. I'd really appreciate it if we're using different pirate pads every session. Can you please make a note of bookmarking them and keeping the links? That would be extremely helpful. Yeah, someone says the fact that so many neoliberals now love George Bush shows how easily Americans can be swayed by bandwagon effect. Look, it's not just Americans. It's the combination of media pressure, propaganda, and social pressure. I see it in New Zealand as well. Almost everybody in New Zealand bought into either Clinton or Trump. The percentage that reject them both is minimal, because everybody wants to know, do you support Trump or Clinton? Which side are you on? Which camp are you in? Are you like me and my friends, or are you like the enemy? Like this is the mentality. Even though we knew years ago that it's a giant sham, so easily that is forgotten. War is peace. Cacti Juice, you're completely right. Kathy B says she doesn't trust any politician. We don't either. Technically, I'm a politician, but in reality, I literally ran as an active protest.
You are an
active
anti-politician.
protest, literally. An active, I think I described it today as an active resistance.
Yeah, like an anti-politician.
I think the politicians that are in power are like anti-politicians, because like real representative democracy should be like Joe and Jane blogs down the street. It should be, you know, the school teachers and the doctors and the people who are part of the community, and this whole idea that you should have to be a like multimillionaire business person to become a politician is antithetical, but that's another conversation. I've spent the whole year talking about electoral politics, so I'll try and stick to Snowden documents now. Politicians represent the donors and not the people, says Cacti Juice. Eben Kim, which media leaks are you talking about? You're referencing Media Leak in the archives. In this series, Eben Kim, we go through everything that has not been specifically written about in Intercept. We try to stick to just what hasn't been already covered there. But if you're searching documents in batch 5 or batch 6, then you're ahead of us. We haven't actually got there yet. Protect what's true. I'm embarrassed to be a US citizen. Protect what's true. The thing is that you aren't really a US citizen. Like, no, I'm not really a New Zealand citizen, because this is a global cabal. These guys fully intend to control every country on earth, and they don't actually give a toss about the US. They just give a toss about power, control, money, resources. And they could equally give a crap less about US citizens as they do about Iraqi citizens or New Zealand citizens or anyone else. We are all cannon fodder to them. They don't care. They will maintain their system of control at any cost. We've seen that. Why do you think they've got all these militarized police forces rolling out across the US and across the West? Like, they wouldn't be doing that if it was sacred to be a US citizen. They wouldn't be violating. They wouldn't be spying on every US citizen if it was sacred to be a US citizen. You guys are brought up to believe that you're special because you're US citizens. But that's equally bullshit to the whole Trump versus Clinton thing. They don't care about US citizens' rights any more than they care about New Zealand citizens' rights or Iraqi citizen rights. At the end of the day, no matter which country you're from, if you tell the truth and you act to change the system, you will end up in exile or dead or, you know, vilified or whatever. And that's why we need to do it at critical mass. That's why we need everybody to simultaneously rise and demand better and speak the truth, because they can't do it to all of us. They can pick off one of us at a time, but they can't cope with millions of us rising, which is why Occupy scared the crap out of them, because there was more people involved in Occupy than the system could cope with, and it took the system months to catch up and to be able to push back. So if all of us rose, they would be up shit creek. These guys would be up shit creek, no matter how many tanks they have. No matter how many bombs they have, they would not be able to cope with it. And that's where we have to head. The information revolution is what educates everybody, but then that education has to be the basis for action at critical mass.
Definitely.
Otherwise, we can just look forward to the next draft and the world war and the continuing hell on earth. Cockatoo says, Bush's speech is based on Goebbels' propaganda principle that it is easier to get away with a massive, humongous lie than with a little one. So they lay on thick, too many lies to know where to start. That entire speech was lies from beginning to end, absolutely. But the only part that was true was we passed XYZ resolution, which we've just extensively discussed how and why they got those resolutions passed. Cacti juice. Cacti juice. I need I need ice cream. I need ice cream or my blanket now. I'm so sad. I feel the same. I feel the same. I'd like to run for comfort too, but that's not going to save us. By all means, do it. Invest a few hours in eating ice cream and cuddling your blanket. I'm fully in support of that. I'm pretty much in support of anything that doesn't involve actively harming other people. Kathy B, it's really great to meet you young people. Thank you for describing me as young when I'm pushing 40. Thank you. It gives me hope, she says. Elizabeth is much younger. She's here to rip the young people. Someone, Negroponte, talk about sadistic monsters you never want to cross paths with. Eben Kim, reading these archives pisses me off. We're not even into 2006 yet. Eben, I know, I feel like we're on this precipice, like in these documents where we're about to like get into like the weaponized drones. We're about to get into the transition period where they really are spying on the entire planet and keeping it forever. We haven't got to where they're building the Utah data facility yet. We haven't got to where they're droning in 7 countries, like not one, but in like 7 countries. And so there's this big gap in our knowledge. Right now we know a whole lot about 2002 to 2000, well, we're still into 2004, but eventually, as you say, it'll be 2006. But wait till we get to 2006 through 2013. Holy crap. I think that's just going to be mind-blowing.
Yeah.
God, I'm so far behind in the chat. You guys are like awesome. I'm sorry. I've got to find a way. I think Cockatoo's working on a way for me to be able to have the chat window always visible, so I can respond to you in real time. Because I'm sorry, I know like right now you guys are writing stuff, and then like 20 minutes later I'm responding to you. Curveball was the supposed validation about the WMD program. He admitted that he lied years later. Cockatoo, we know that NSA, oh, right. Cockatoo is quoted that like last line, we know that NSA will continue providing incredible support to the new frontline players at US UN. He said emphasis on incredible, as in you really can't believe in it. Which number did we end with? Do you know, Elizabeth?
Last time?
Look, I've actually still got documents open.
Last time we ended
try
on.
And finish off those last.
Last one we ended on was 60 on the last session we had. I'm not sure which one we're up to today. Let me check.
76.
That's pretty decent.
That only means we only got through 12 documents, but that document was easily like worth an entire episode in and of itself.
Yeah, I think for having focused so much on this one, I think 16, 17 isn't that bad.
Wow. Okay, I'm just quickly making a note of that. That was huge. And I've got to say as well, it makes perfect sense for the Intercept to release them in chronological order, to study them and release them in chronological order. Because can you see how our understanding of the topics is like as we move through, it's a very cohesive way to study them.
Definitely.
It's almost like we're almost like it's like a training. Like each batch is giving us the foundation information that we need in order to be able to competently analyze the batch that follows.
Definitely.
Pepsi or Coke, Cactus Juice says, yeah, completely true. Protect what's true. Wonder how we can dig ourselves out of such a viper's nest. By massing together and using all of our collective smarts and never losing our heart. You can't become like them. That's the worst thing. Like if you find yourself like running around in black in a death squad, then guess what? You're doing it wrong. Someone, I'm not sure what you're thanking me for saying, but you're totally welcome. As usual, I'm just giving my completely uncensored opinion ad nauseum. Fortunately, a few people seem to be able to tolerate that. Oh, that is such a cool thing to say. Protect what's true. Occupy is permanently inside us. Protect what's true. Occupy is like my ideological compass. Like when people say to me, oh, you must be a Trump supporter. Oh, you've turned conservative. I ask myself, like, am I acting in accordance with the original principles of the Occupy movement? Am I for the 99%? Am I against the 1%? Do I believe the system is broken? Do I want to bring an end to crony capitalistic rule? Do I want to protect the planet? Am I anti-war? Am I anti-fracking? You know, these, all of the core tenets of the Occupy movement. And the answer to all of that is yes. It's still yes. It was yes in 2011 and it was yes in 2017. So that ideological compass is how I check myself.
Yeah.
How I make sure that I'm not moving. You know, we were pro free speech, pro freedom of information, freedom of assembly, all of it in 2011. I'm still that in 2017. So those people who have gone from Occupy ideology to, oh, we better vote for Clinton, they are the ones whose ideology has shifted. I'm still back at the system is broke, Democrats and Republicans are not serving us and we need something different. And that's I don't shift from that.
I once had a great conversation. I said that it was a fantastic interaction with a shill for Hillary Clinton on Twitter. And I kept asking, because they kept saying, you know, how could you not support her? And I basically was saying, you know, show me one time where she's actually been liberal. Because that faction has moved so far to the right, and I was like, show me just one example, and they couldn't, and I was just like, how is fracking liberal? How is, you know, down the list? And anyway, I'm just saying, like, they really can't defend themselves when you push them. So it goes to what you're saying about you staying in that liberal Occupy mindset where the centrist Clinton camp has gone so far to the right. So
Matt, Cypherpunk's amazing. Julian Assange's books are amazing. And that's yet another, you know, people are like, Julian is this, Julian is that, Julian thinks this, Julian tweeted that. They go and read Julian's books. They go and watch The World Tomorrow. They will learn stuff that will blow their mind. And if you can't put yourself in that headspace of someone who knows that much about how the world really works, you can't sit in judgment by what they said in 140 characters or whatever. You can't put yourself in the shoes where you would actually do what he's done and pay the price that he has. You can't sit in judgment either.
Yeah, and I think making character assassinations of leaders of groups that are so important, like WikiLeaks, I think to then try to dismiss the importance of WikiLeaks' work is absolutely ridiculous. People have these petty arguments about personalities when the organization is doing such an important thing, and they just kind of gloss over it. And it encourages people to not go and read WikiLeaks, you know, if you're arguing about a person. So.
Chocolate and vanilla ice cream. Protect what's true. I would love some chocolate and vanilla ice cream about now. Kathy B, there's a problem with infiltrators within every group, but that doesn't mean we cannot rise. I totally agree. The most famous example is the Stasi in East Germany. They said 10% of the population of the country, or may have even been more, was Stasi informants, and the Berlin Wall still fell. So if you have critical mass, it doesn't matter how many informants they have, it doesn't matter how much sabotage they're engaged in, you can still beat them. You can still win. It doesn't matter how many people they surveil. That's the thing. If they, you know, they might surveil 1 million dissidents, but then they've only got the physical resources to do something about 20,000 of them. You know, you win. Critical mass is how you beat that. Okay, thank you so much. Someone, thank you. You guys have just been incredible. Does anyone have any questions? I'm gonna like wrap up really, really soon. But if you want to ask us anything, I've caught up on the chat. Yeah, no more porn bots, Cockatoo, I saw that. I'm really tired and looking forward to stretching my legs. Okay, I don't think there's any questions. Guys, I'm just gonna pretty much log off now. Thank you so much. It was really cool. I'm so grateful that we had so many people here.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you all.
It's really, really, really awesome. Really awesome. And it's cool. It's really awesome to see our like little community is growing every time.
Yeah, it is.
So thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Oh, I think we got our first ever dislike.
Oh, really? Wonderful.
That's so amusing to me, because I've noticed all our past videos are like all likes and no dislikes. So we've achieved.
We have to work on that. We have to piss more people off. So
maybe it was George Bush.
Maybe. Maybe he was a Clinton supporter and I insulted the centrists. So either way.
Okay, see you guys later. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Appreciate it.
And see you next time. Bye-bye.